Elizabeth Chappell, a lifelong entrepreneur who finally found my niche. After years of new ideas and jumping from business to business, I figured out how to turn a craft into a successful career. In 2016, I started a monthly subscription box for Quilters. That little startup has grown into a thriving, multiple six-figure business that I am so proud of. As a published author, designer of fabrics and patterns being sold throughout the world, my favorite thing to do is to teach others how to grow a career of their dreams. Each week, you'll hear from me or from other guests who are creative entrepreneurs, so you can learn exactly what to do and what not to do to grow a career that's more rewarding and successful than you ever thought possible. If you're ready to turn your craft into a career that you love, I am so excited you're here. Welcome to the Craft to Career podcast. Welcome to this very special episode of the Craft to Career podcast. I am just thrilled. I saw a friend, Belle of Seems So Me. She posted on her Instagram stories about a new documentary coming on Netflix. And she happened to tag the editor of that Netflix documentary. And I was like, I'm just going to reach out to him and see. It's a documentary called The Quilters. And it actually goes into, well, I'm going to let Will, the producer, explain what the documentary is and what it's all about. Needless to say, it is about quilters, but it's very, very different from what you might be thinking. But I reached out and Will agreed to be on the podcast. And I'm so excited to have a behind the scenes conversation with the editor of this documentary short film. First of all, editing is, I edit my reels, I've edited things I've recorded for courses, but never a film or a documentary. So this is a whole new territory for me. So very excited for you to hear from Will, who was very hands-on with this film that's coming out May 16th. And it's really just a beautiful look at so many aspects, but of quilting in particular, and the human spirit and forgiveness and moving on. And if that seems surprising to you that this is all tied together, you're going to love this. Before we jump in, I just want to give a shout out. Cindy Hilfiger of the Long Arm Quilter just left a review for the podcast, which brings us to 294 reviews. We are so close to 300. If you please can leave a review, it means so much, and it really helps us to get amazing guests like we have today. So please take just a moment to leave a review for the podcast. And now let's jump in and meet William Rogers, the editor of the short film coming to Netflix, The Quilters. So, Will, thank you so much for being here on the Craft to Career podcast. It's really such an honor. For our listeners, can you just share a brief introduction about who you are, what you do?
Sure. So I'm Will. My full name is Will Rogers. I am an editor in film and television and really all things video, but I've sort of gravitated over the course of my career towards documentary, feature films, short films, television. It's just really how things have worked out.
Very cool. And before we started recording, I was telling you my son is in high school and he's in this class and he films everything. And you were like, that's how I started too. So can you kind of share your journey of how you got started in film and editing?
Sure. So sometime in middle school, my mom bought me a little tiny Canon, I think it was called a digital ELPH, like ELPH. I forget what the branding was on those back then. So I had this little digital camera and I started filming everything. And I was like, wait a second, I have all these videos of, trees and ponds and, very uninteresting things. And I wanted to cut them together. I said, I want to make something out of this. So I started putting them together in Windows Movie Maker. And eventually that, as you work on a craft, you sort of think about, I want this to be better. How do I make it better? So I was like, I want a better camera. What's the best editing software? Over time, I was making videos of my friends and I doing stupid stuff, because when you're a kid, we were all watching Jackass, like Johnny Knoxville, and we were just going around, blowing things up and, beating the crap out of each other and just making terrible videos of all this stuff. And I'm very glad that we didn't have social media when I was in middle school and high school. And from that, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to do something with filmmaking, something with, a camera, something with being in front of a computer and making magic happen on a screen. And that translated to me going into college and not knowing entirely what I wanted to do. And then ever since then, I just bounced around doing, assistant editing on features. And then I became a part of an agency that did short documentary films. They were branding films for for corporations that wanted to make stuff with heart and not just ads. Like not nothing to ding against ads and the people who work in the filmmaking in that world, but there's something about making something that's documentary that is just, as is. You see something as it is and you try to just film it, and people are authentic, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I worked there, and I became an editor there, and that was for short form. So that's stuff that's like 15 minutes or less. And then from there, I wanted to get into bigger and better things, and I eventually got into broadcast television, and I had become an assistant editor again, and that was right around the time that Trump got elected. And then I worked on this series called Why We Hate, which was a 6-part documentary series about the human condition and why people just hate at all. So it was the political side of that. It was the biological side of that, the socioeconomic. Each episode was an exploration. I was the lead assistant editor on that. And from there, parlayed that and became an editor right as COVID hit. And ever since then, I've been editing for, stuff for HBO. And this is for my first Netflix thing. The Quilters is my first thing to ever go on Netflix, and a few other streaming services, etc. So that is the nutshell of where I started and where I got to now.
Yeah, so I studied English literature in college, and it's very fascinating I envy film in a way, because writing, you can do some description and things, but in a film, you can show things in a way that you cannot in the written form. And both are very powerful, but I just feel like film has a whole different, toolkit you can work with. And it's very powerful, very persuasive.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because it's everywhere now, right? The filmmaking medium has just come everywhere. It's in your pocket constantly. People might not think of TikTok and YouTube and Instagram Shorts as filmmaking necessarily, but if you go there, you'll see people, they'll sometimes they'll just be sitting in front of the camera and, talking at the camera for, however long they can. But also there's people making these beautiful short moments that could be an excerpt from a film, right? So the prevalence of filmmaking and its power, as you talked about, is it's universal. People like seeing other people, and everything that we do is storytelling, and people want to get as close to other people and to know their stories and see the stories that they have to tell. And so the best thing we can do over large distances without just seeing each other in person is video and film. So that does that beautifully. And that is, I don't know if I just completely went around your question there.
No, I love it. It's like making my brain think. In fact, I love marketing. Business is so fun for me. And story is the thing that sells, which I feel yuck saying that, but for whatever reason, the human brain connects with story, which I actually really I wrote down Why We Hate, because that's fascinating. I want to go watch that. But the Quilters, this Netflix show, do we call it a documentary? Do we call it a short film? What do we call it?
It's a documentary short film. It's both.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I can't go wrong.
No.
All right. So the Quilters, why don't you tell us a little bit what it's about and the premise of it?
Sure. So it's funny to approach it. You have to do the history of America to sort of get into it, and prison reform. But there's a prison in Licking, Missouri, which is a maximum security prison. And there's the men in there are they're 25 to life. It's long-term imprisonment, and these guys have done bad things, and they're going to be there forever. And these guys need to pass the time somehow. And usually in prison, you see guys working out, you see general prison life. It's not the best, and that is a sort of bare minimum way of saying that. But in Licking, Missouri, in this prison, they've adopted a program where the men can quilt for a certain period of time during the day. And it's only a very specific number of men within the prison, because there's, a huge population there, but it's about, I think it's like somewhere between 10 to 30 guys, if that. It's definitely like less than 30 people that get to quilt. And there aren't any other programs within this prison that qualifies as a prisoner reform or like mental. This is it. And so Jan McShane, the director of this, got the idea from Toby Shimon, who is the co-editor, my co-editor on this film, from an article that they had read that Licking, Missouri was doing this program to help the prisoners sort of rehab and pass the time. And so Jen was like, oh, I'm going to go film this. I want to see these men quilting and see what this is all about. And so they filmed for several days over the course of several months and to a year just to see what these men were doing. And they got to see these men just doing something that gave them purpose in a situation which otherwise does not allow for men to have purpose. And they quilt for the end result of these quilts is to provide for to provide quilts for foster children, and that's where all the quilts end up. There's other ways that these quilts go out, like they'll make the quilt, like they have a certain project and this quilt has to go somewhere, and there's other places that the quilts go for charity, but most of the time, as far as I understood from the way we were editing it, the film, the quilts would wind up with foster children, and under the sort of umbrella, these were their birthday quilts. And the men would always, there was this, in fact, at one point during filming, there's this spreadsheet or hang up on a wall that has all of these kids' birthdays, and that was basically their due date. They would have to quilt and get it done, 5-10 days ahead of time and ship the quilts out for these kids' birthdays.
That is so cool. And I did not think I was going to go down this path, but I remember years ago reading about some European country that their prison system is very different than what we do in America. And they teach them how to garden and just really kind of rehabilitate them to life, or teach them, how to think and be differently. And I shared it with a group of women friends, and they were like, no, they're bad people. They should be punished. And it's a very interesting viewpoint, that the compassion to be able to see potential in someone and forgive them. And,
that's something that is a common thought amongst people. I can't say the world, but I have seen this in the United States. People want to punish these people, and they want to repeatedly punish them and sort of like take their head and drive their nose into the dirt, forever and ever. These guys are in prison, right? Like they got sentenced, they did their crime, and now they are doing their time. And so if you've ever heard anything about solitary confinement or people being removed from any kind of just, stimulus or sort of social engagement, it drives them absolutely crazy, and it's torture. And it is not the way to treat any human being, regardless of their crime. And these men know why they're in there. The people that go, especially the people that go into the quilting program, these are guys who actively choose to come into this quilting program, right? They have good behavior, and so they're allowed and entitled to be there, within reason. If they screw up or something, they get their privileges revoked. So really it's a privilege for them to be there. But then while they're there, they reflect and they talk about that, and that's something that gets explored in the film, right? These guys express regret. These guys express the thought process, and they've spent a lot of time, like day after day after day, for 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 years thinking about this, thinking about that crime that they did that got them there. Was it a terrible crime? Yes. Now they're here. They're away. They don't need to be further ground into the ground. They are here, away safely, and doing what they need to do to rehab. And some of these guys have a time. They will get out, right? Some of these guys are there, forever. They're never coming out. But some of these guys will get out eventually, albeit in their 80s, because they might have committed a crime when they were 30 or 40 or whatever. And you want these people to come out better. You don't want them to come out hateful and resentful of the system that put them in there. Otherwise, they're going to do some more terrible stuff, right? You want them to think and learn and reflect. And a program like this is essential for that. Hopefully
we have trust in the human condition, spirit, that we can improve and heal. And when they do leave, let's hope. I just think that this being a part of giving, like they have a child's birthday on this list and they're creating something that's going to brighten their life, to give people that kind. We all need a purpose, I mean, I think of like, I go down this path. If I were to become a vegetable and I couldn't do anything, I imagine these scenarios. I don't know if anyone else does this. This might be very weird, but I'm like, what could I do to bring purpose to my life? So to take that away from people is to take away their humanity. So I love this on that level, that like we give them a purpose, we give them a skill, we give them a way to brighten someone's day. So I just think that that's beautiful. But but who teaches them?
So there's several characters that you meet, and one of the characters, sorry about that. There's several guys that you meet, and a lot of them actually talk about their mothers, and they talk about the sort of the matriarchs in their family as having passed these skills down to them. You got to remember, some of these guys are in their 50s, their 60s. So their moms and their grandmothers, they've been in these families where, mom was quilting or mom was sewing or mom was patching something up, right, for like their clothes. And several of these guys have had that experience. So one of the guys, whose name is Chill, he actually had an upholstery business before being locked up. Several different iterations of that. He went through several different, he worked with leather. He's worked with different kinds of like canvas for upholstery. And then another guy, like I said, his grandmother was super into quilting, and she taught him how to, patch up his clothes. And so they all had... Not they all, like this is not everyone, but some of these guys who were the cornerstones of the program actually had this knowledge and then passed it around to these other guys who came into the program. I'm not exactly sure how it initially got off the ground in terms of who taught who first, the chicken and egg situation. I think that there was some stuff that we had filmed originally where that might have been explained a little bit better, but we went a different route just to sort of get us right into the prison, just to get us right in with the guys. And so we skipped a few formalities in that regard because it wasn't really important to what we were trying to say. But there's this one guy whose name is Ricky, who is the sort of commander of the room, and he's just going around helping everyone out, showing them how to fix the sewing machines, showing them how to do certain patterns, showing them how to marry pieces up, showing them how to calculate like inches, or they do inches. So they'll do, let's say you have like a 3-inch piece, right? He teaches them to do 3.5 inches because you need to have a quarter on each side so you can fold them over and stitch up underneath to get everything to connect. And that's, might seem obvious to somebody who's been quilting for, 5 years, but to a person who's new, they're just going to take a 3-inch piece and a 3-inch piece, put it together and try, like, wait a second, all of a sudden I've wound up with a 2-inch and 3/4 piece. Oh no, now I have an uneven part and I got to tear it apart and start over. And, I'm sure guys have made this mistake over and over again, but that knowledge gets passed around. It's prison, so it's low to no budget, if any, like I said, no budget whatsoever. So these guys are teaching each other. It's very community. It's very communal. And yeah.
That's cool. So did you get to go in and meet these guys, or did they just give you the film afterwards? Like, what did that look like on your end?
Right. So there are some editors who, dabble in the world of like going on set and knowing these sorts of things and being a part of the filming process. I've never very infrequently do I go on location, or have I ever been on location of filming. So for this film, when I got into the editing process, it had all been shot. There was one more scene, I think, one more day that was given to us about a couple of months into filming. They had gone back and they'd filmed something more, but I was squarely in my bedroom editing the whole time. Never went to Missouri. I don't think I've never been to Missouri. But there's plenty of directors and who are director editors, who are producer editors, who will go back and forth and do that, but that's not something that I've done.
So you could work from anywhere. That sounds like the ideal job, which is neither here nor there, but it sounds nice.
You would think so. It's a little tricky with feature films and these kinds of films. So the kind of cameras that we film with are large and the file sizes are large. So I'll try to boil it down. But basically, there's tons and tons of footage. And so storing that safely, you have to sometimes have these big honking hard drives. And so, yes, I can work from everywhere, but I will most often work from my bedroom because it sort of locks me down because I have this like giant hard drive sitting next to me. And if you hard drives themselves versus solid state drives are safer. They're cheaper. Sorry. Hard drives are cheaper than other forms of storage. And of course, the name of the game when making low budget filmmaking is to keep it as cheap as possible. And so it's hard to move around. But yes, editors in general can work from pretty much anywhere now, because ever since COVID happened, most production companies don't want to pay for office space.
Yep.
They would gladly.
And why if you don't? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm super curious, and maybe you can't share this, but I'm going to ask, were there any like crazy, scary, funny scenes that they were like, yeah, we're going to need to cut that out, or like, oh, let's just cut that out, but you got to see it because you got all the footage, you know?
Sure. No, there was nothing crazy that was, on the cutting room floor or things that just didn't get put in. There was one time, I think there was a fight in the common area, and when that happens, all the guards kind of go running to go take care of it. Not like something crazy you'd see on, like Netflix, HBO, where like it's a giant brawl. It's usually it's something more localized and small than that. Something like that had happened, and you kind of saw everyone like look up for a second, and then they all kind of settled back in, but nothing really crazy. There is a part of the film where one of the guys sort of does screw up and doesn't come back to the program, and that's a part of the like last part of the film, which is interesting, but it's not salaciously huge or anything. But no, there wasn't anything crazy that we missed. I mean, so part of that, a lot of the things that didn't make it in, these guys were big, like, they're big potty mouths, like they swear a ton. But when the camera came in and Jen, the filmmaker, came in, they would just button right up and they were polite and like, saying Mrs.
Oh, really?
This. Yes. they were on their A game in terms of being very good human beings for the camera. And you could hear it sometimes when the camera would move away or something, they'd talk a little bit more naturally. And that's actually a bit of a conundrum for filmmakers in general, documentary filmmakers, going into a situation, because you want to see these guys as they are, and you strive to film them as much as you can as they are. But no matter what we do, a camera comes into the room, you change, right? You put on a little bit, you become an actor, right? And also we are all media literate to some degree now, and we're all very well aware of where these videos and these cameras and everything ends up and who sees them. Even these guys, some of these guys who are 60, 50, right? They are all familiar with the camera as a concept. So people change when they're filmed. And so that was an interesting challenge. But like I said, there were things on microphones, things, that we would hear them saying certain kinds of things that, wouldn't wind up in the film no matter what. But it was them being a little more raw.
When I first started offering online courses and a membership, I needed a platform that could do it all without giving me a tech headache. That is why I chose Kajabi. I have been blown away by everything it can do. With Kajabi, I run my courses, a membership, email marketing all in one place. You can even build a website with a blog and sell digital products, host webinars and coaching calls, and even set up an affiliate program all without needing a dozen different tools. And the best part, it's powerful yet easy to use. I love it so much that I even created a free course to show you how to get started with Kajabi. Access my free course on how to use Kajabi and try Kajabi for free by visiting bit.ly/QC Kajabi or visit the show notes for the link. If you're ready to streamline your business and enjoy the process, give Kajabi a try. You are going to love it. I am curious, when you do these documentaries, like, is there a point where people get comfortable enough that you see that, or where they, I mean, it's different if they don't think the camera's on, but do they ever get comfortable enough where that kind of shuts off?
It happens. I mean, some people are more natural than others, right? Some people will just say, I don't care. And they're just themselves for the most part. I think longer term filming, especially if the director becomes friends with the subject, they will start to relax more and the camera becomes natural. Because when you see a camera, like a big camera in your face or off to the side, it's really uncomfortable. It's this huge piece of technology. I mean, they've gotten smaller now, but it's still this imposing thing, and it's just like, it's recording me. But over time, you could become more comfortable with it. And I think that those long-term, like year-long projects or like lifelong projects, you can see people become more authentic and comfortable. And also another thing that's happening that's really interesting is that kids are being raised with cameras now constantly, right? So the outcome of that is, we're seeing it, but it's yet to be seen on how authentic people will be, having had the concept of filmmaking in their lives since they could remember. I'll be very curious to see how that shakes out with documentaries in 5 years.
It brings, I mean, I go deep and stuff, but I'm like, does it shape how we are all the time, where we feel like we're always on camera, or does it shape how we show up on the camera? I mean, just,
I think so. I totally think so.
Yeah.
I think kids are struggling with the concept of privacy, right? And not having any privacy, or if anything happens to them, if they're in a situation where someone can just film them in 5 seconds after they've done something dumb or just anything, I think you're going to be guarded, right? You're going to be guarded when you know that your mess up is permanently enshrined in something.
Yeah. Or I see sometimes too, around teenagers, where it's like they're almost always trying to be a little funny or perform a little bit. And it's like, now that you say it, I'm like, the camera's not on, but they just kind of feel like they're all, I don't know. Yeah. Very interesting.
The concept of fame, right? Being introduced at a young age. It's very bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see how that all shakes out. Very interesting. So I'm curious how long this filming process took. You mentioned at least a year, but then how long did the editing process take too?
Sure. So I think the filming took somewhere between half a year to a year, because it was about, oh my goodness, I'm going to look back at the editing project and completely screw this up. But I'm thinking we had 12 shooting days, maybe like 12 to 15 shooting days. Actually, so they go in and they would shoot from, they would film from 9 in the morning until 5 at night, or whenever they were allowed to be in that room with them. And they occasionally, sometimes they had days where they would block out, where they would go, film outside of the room, or they would film shots of the prison itself. But for the most part, they were just in the room. But the editing process, that didn't take any longer than a year to get to finally where we wound up. Because when we started, there was the question of, what is this? Is this going to be a feature film? Does it have enough to carry us for an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes? Or is this going to be a 50-minute, episode of television? Is this going to be 20 minutes long. You don't know until you start working on it. And Toby, Shimon, and I worked on it side by side. Like, she would do some scenes, I would do some scenes. I think she worked on a little bit when I had to go do a different job. And then I came back and I worked on it for a little bit. We were, very collaborative on it. We got to about 55-minute edit. At some point, that decision had been made that it was definitely going to be a short film. It was just a matter of how long that short film was going to be. And we screened it for people. We screened that 50-minute cut. And it was very well received, but people had lots of ideas. And I think we realized eventually that it needed to just come down in time to really sell certain parts of the film and to make each of these things more impactful, because there's tons of stories in there. There was tons of moments we could have just lived with these guys and really gotten to know them more. There was lots of little interactions that were beautiful and wonderful. And there's also, we had about, I think 8 microphones. There could be a couple more. And those microphones weren't always, it was just one camera, right? So there was one camera, 8 microphones, and what the person's mouth moving in front of the camera wasn't always sunk up to what was happening. We had to go through and sift through all that audio to make sure we didn't miss anything relevant or interesting.
A year of editing. That's a lot of editing. I was thinking maybe like a couple months, but like a year.
It was like 3/4 of a year to a year, I think, roughly. Yeah.
And you said something, I wrote down, sell these moments. So you decided, you showed, I forget what it's called, but like a preview film, which I'm very curious how people get invited to that. That'd be so cool to see these preview films, but side note. So then you said, okay, we really want to focus on these moments and sell these moments. What moments are these, and how did you decide it's going to be this moment and this moment,
Sure. So the people that get invited to these are usually families and friends and people who, when you work in the film industry, a lot of times your friends are other producers, other directors, other editors. So those people that get invited are generally, you're trying to have a couple people that are just completely film agnostic and don't go into the industry because you want that reaction. But then you also want the critique of people who know the craft, who can provide certain other kinds of insight for you. And so from that first screening of the 50-minute cut, we got, you will hear feedback from people. They'll tell you what they like and what they don't like. And you try to listen to everything and listen around what they're saying too, because sometimes somebody will be they'll say something very prescriptive. They'll want you to move this scene to the beginning or move this part and they don't know how we got to this part of the film or to this cut of the film. They don't understand that certain things are missing, or we can't go back and fix certain kinds of things. We can't refilm certain things. So we know our constraints, but we listen to what they're saying. We listen to the critique, and we try to make changes based on that. And so you can gather from these screenings which characters people resonate with, right? Like, we'd have a general idea of like who the central characters are, and that, that was there throughout. Like, Ricky is the center of this film, and so is Chill, and so is Jimmy. And then there's a couple other characters who sort of like come in and have their own moments. Like there's this one character named Jeremiah who has this beautiful scene about regret and reflection with Ricky. They are working on Jeremiah's quilt, and then they talk about their past, and it's really this beautiful moment that happens, I think, about a third of the way in. But that scene we had that in like different spots. We were trying to figure out the best place to put that. Do you put the moment about regret and reflection towards the end? Because, that's sort of natural, right? Like, you have to reflect at the end of things. Like, no, okay, we actually want to do that sooner. Those moments and decisions come out of screenings when other people have reactions. People will say like, oh, I felt like I was looking at my watch at minute 20 for some reason, or I was, I really liked this guy, but we introduced him too late. There's all these kinds of things that come in from those screenings that you might not have heard, because when you're working on something, you get a little echo chambery within your own team, and you do your best to preserve the feelings that you had when you first watched everything. and how you felt about those things. But sometimes you lose it, right? You start editing things, you can edit things too much so that it's too fast, or you lose the emotion, and it can get away from you, and that's very normal and very much part of the process. And it's very good to have people watch and give you their candid first watch responses, because that's how anybody sees a film, right? They see a film, it's their first time seeing it. So when you're an editor and a director and a producer and you're just in it all the time, you've seen something 1,000 times. And so sometimes the impact gets lost, and screenings help with that.
So, okay, from your perspective as an editor, what are your takeaways about quilting? Like, what is the role that it plays in these people's lives?
Sure. So this is something I've actually thought about a lot. So I'm going to get there in a roundabout way. When a lot of people start working in filmmaking, they think about the end result. They think about the awards, maybe. They think about the accolades. They think about the screening. They think about, getting a pat on the back. They think about, where this is going to be shown, because obviously you want people to see your film, right? So like part of being a filmmaker is look at what I did, right? Essentially. And so when you start into that career, you have that in your mind, but you quickly realize that that sort of accolade, that affirmation doesn't happen to you every single day. You have to show up, you have to film, or you have to edit, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. You have to do your piece of the puzzle of the big filmmaking pie. And it is a day-to-day, minute-to-minute, second-to-second thing, and you have to be okay with the process at hand. So, like any filmmaker, I had that struggle myself. I'd thought about like awards and, where is this film going to wind up? Is it going to be on TV? Is it going to be here? Is it going to be there? And I realized that I had to fall in love with the process of editing and be happy with that. And I've always loved editing, but I had to sort of, come to that. And I feel that something like quilting or any hand, manual craft is very much all about the now. And let me say it again. Sorry, my wife and I work in the same house. The craft of quilting is very much about the now and what you are doing at this moment. You have something, you have a vision, right? You've mapped it out. You've got your colors, you've got your patterns, you've thought about something, and you have a vision about what it's going to become. But the day-to-day happiness of just being a human being is right here, right now, the second to second, the minute to minute. And you have to be happy with each stitch, with putting two pieces together, with having 4 pieces become 8, become 16, become 32, and I just made a big corner. I just made this stripe that's going to run here. Like, it's these things that give you pleasure and happiness on a moment-to-moment basis. And that is what editing is. And I'm sure it applies to many other crafts and careers as well. But I feel that people who get into manual crafting, such as quilting, learn patience, they learn purpose, they learn introspection, they learn how to just be, because there's something very meditative about that process. And I respect that.
What? I mean, I love that. I wrote down just what you said, fall in love with the process, because it's true for everything, I feel like. But as far as like building a business, so this particular podcast is taking quilting or crafting and turning it into a career. I think a lot of people see that. They're like, I want to earn money. I want to, I don't know, have a big audience or whatever. But like, if you don't love the process, the end result is not worth it. Like if you don't love quilting, then don't get into making a quilt. You may love the finished quilt. you may as well just go buy one if you don't like the process, and same with editing. I mean, anything, if you're not loving and there's parts of the process that we all love more than others, like I'm sure with editing, there's certain parts that you're like, yeah, this part I love. And this part, you just got to do it. But generally, loving the process in general. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, there's many things. It's funny. I have really favorite parts of the editing process and parts that I would not say I hate them, but they are my least favorite parts. And sometimes if there's a project that's got tons of footage, you just have to watch it, right? You really just have to watch it. And sometimes I get very itchy when I'm just watching hours and hours of footage because you have to take notes. Because if something's very interesting, you have to note it because it might be relevant later. And then it's just hours and hours and hours of that. When I really want to just get to my editing timeline where the clips are there and I can start marrying things up and making scenes and making moments happen, putting music, putting, sound effects if it's, something that requires sound effects, all these things that make something pop, and you can have you can make the viewer feel what they need to feel just making someone feel, period. That's the beauty in editing that I love. And there's parts of it that you just have to do the groundwork in order for that to happen. So
yeah, the tedious parts. So for our listeners, can you share when the Quilters comes out, where to find it? And should they follow you? Tell us about that.
Sure. The Quilters debuts on Netflix on May 16th. And that is so wonderful. We did not start as a Netflix production. We were acquired by Netflix. And that came a little after we were shortlisted for an Oscar nomination. Well, no Oscar nomination. We were shortlisted for an Oscar, which is the step before the Oscar nomination. And sometime after that, we garnered Netflix's attention and they bought the film. Anyways.
That's cool. Wow.
What was the other part of the question?
And then, should they follow you? Do you want people to follow you, or
sure,
are you just go watch the show?
Yeah, just go watch it. It's great. It's a beautiful short look into what hopefully is the improvement of the American prison system. Because we know America is in a bit of a change right now. It's good to see something positive about one of our systems that needs improvement. And these men are also just beautiful human beings, and watching them do something that so many people resonate with it's a beautiful connection to the everyday people. These are everyday people, but they're in prison. So, as far as following me, you could follow me on Instagram. I post a lot of cat videos. Mostly stories. What is my Instagram? I think it's William Edward R. Yeah, that's me. I was trying to start doing a TikTok in my spare time, but that hasn't really taken off yet.
It's never a good time. Well, I will say quilters tend to be cat people as well. So very good crossover there. And I think I will be very surprised to see, but there's a lot of quilters in the world. So I think there's going to be a large following for this documentary short film. And then plus just the general intrigue about quilters who are working on, I think it'll be received really well. So I can't wait for it to come out.
Every time we've screened it, everyone loves it. I think people who quilt, who come to see it, just adore it. People who don't know anything about quilting, who are a little hesitant, who might have been dragged by somebody else to watch it, they love it. I think people will be very happy to watch this. And I know attention spans are short and precious, but it's 35 minutes. It is 33 minutes, but it is a beautiful, beautiful film, and it's over before you know it because it's just, and you want to see more. And we could have put in more, but that's always the trick, right? It's leave them wanting more.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to also say that, this is just me right now, but there's so many people involved in getting this done, getting this from where it was to Oscar shortlisted to Netflix, and a huge part of that is Jennifer McShane, the director. And without this was just wouldn't happen at all. She's the brains and the everything. And, it's, as an introverted person who sits behind a desk and edits on my computer, she goes out and gets these stories, and she gets in people's faces and asks tough questions and makes things happen. And also, Toby Shimon, my co-editor, who was my supervising editor for another film that I cut myself, which was Pay or Die, which is all about the insulin affordability crisis in the United States. She is brilliant and has a long resume that I cannot even begin to list, and has mentored me and gotten me to this position. And I have been very, very privileged to work on this and be surrounded by people who are smarter than me, which is always something people should strive to do, which is to surround themselves with people more talented, smarter than you, so you can continue to learn.
All right. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to have you here. And listeners, go check it out. The Quilters, May 16th on Netflix. You're going to love it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Will, thank you so much for being here, for being a guest on the podcast. It really is just beautiful having conversations that are a little outside the box, talking about prisoners and what their life looks like and the beauty. I mean, I think often about creating with my own two hands, but definitely this is in a whole different realm. So thank you so much. I can hardly wait. The time that I'm recording this, it has not been released, but May 16th, check out on Netflix. Hopefully it will be available wherever you are. Be sure to check out The Quilters. And again, Will, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Craft to Career podcast.